the global music world hit its rock bottom when at age 75 André Rieu, the king of the waltz, fell to his demise. Mid-P performance and everything changed after that. But what triggered that collapse at the height of his brilliance? To understand, we have to know what exactly happened in his life. Born on October 1st, 1949, André Rieu was born into a family and a time when families wanted discipline above a child's sanity. He was the third of 6 children with a father whose baton ruled the house as mercilessly as he ruled the stage. His father, also named André, was a famous conductor respected by orchestras, but at his own house he was feared by children. There were no lullabies in their home, no laughter. Love was abstract and cold. My parents didn't love me, André would later say, not as a wound dug up, but as a quiet admission of fact. His mother was obsessed with grades and skills. She saw imagination as a liability. When a teacher praised his artistry, it was shouted back at him through the house, like an accusation. Creative impulse was weakness, not strength. But when he became 5 years old, everything changed. A slender, graceful 18-year-old took him under her wing. She was his first violin mentor. She didn't reprimand him. She coaxed him to feel. In her bow's sweep, young André found something he'd never known. Freedom, not love, not romance. Just a tremor that sounded like life. And he was undoubtedly in awe. Then he got into music. That magnetic feeling. It was not victory. It was the start of something that would arise deep inside him. Other children practiced scales. He chased resonance. Yet joy came with a cost. In his teen years, his burgeoning passion for waltzes clashed with his father's austerity. At home, his beau's lyricism was scorned. I didn't raise you to play waltzes, his father screamed at him. Those words didn't just rebuke style. They aimed to kill his soul. The final hammer to his soul came around 1968 when Marjorie appeared. André's chosen companion, not a conductor's score. His mother met her with fury. Leave, she ordered. Rejection piled on top of rejection. That very night, André walked out. He never turned back. There, home remained untouched, an empty shell. As he rose to stardom, his parents didn't attend his concerts, not once. Despite arenas packed with adoring fans, the silence at home was a memory he couldn't shake. I spent years in therapy trying to understand why my childhood felt so hollow, he once confessed. The applause never filled that void, but through music he finally felt seen. The violin wasn't simply an instrument, it was a lifeline. Whenever he played, windows opened. In 1978, after years of formal orchestral testing and enduring the sterile echo of concert halls, André broke and started the rebellion. He launched the Maastricht Salon Orchestra, 12 dreamers, no costumes, with a lot of hope. These young dreams were performing in modest community halls, backyard weddings, forgotten border towns. They were playing music just for the sake of music. No critics, no grand stages, just sound shared, human. All of that was on the outside, but inside, there was someone else at the heart of all operations. It was Marjorie. She was steady, precise, unseen, and handled business meetings, bookings, and ghostwriting arrangements. She was the invisible force behind his visible magic. When he hesitated at the idea of buying a crumbling castle, she quipped, "Sell more records." Not for his interest or curiosity, but to build the future. This quiet revolution wasn't televised. It was leaked. In 1987, he formally founded the Johann Strauss Orchestra. 12 musicians, but a radical mission to restore music's heartbeat. They ditched solemn formality. Instead of black tailcoats, they wore color, inviting joy. Their 1988 New Year's Day premiere, filled with dancing lights and laughing melodies, was electric. Critics laughed at them, but audiences surged. They weren't attending a concert. They were reclaiming music. By 1995, on one of Europe's grandest stages, the UEFA Champions League final in Vienna, there was a spontaneous transformation that took place. Rieu strode onto the pitch, with his orchestra as Shikovich's Waltz. New sword. Football fans paused, swayed, and clapped. The stadium was alight with grace. The tension of sport melted by strain. When Ajax scored, the timing felt cosmic. The moment became legend. Overnight, Strauss and company flew to #1 in the Netherlands for 19 weeks. It was something unheard of for classical music. It sold millions globally. Australia followed right after that. In Melbourne, over 38,000 people filled stadium seats to witness a fairy tale in real time. Not only that, they had 8 of the top 10 DVDs in the country. All of them belonged to him. He stood shoulder to shoulder with pop icons like Pink and AC/DC. After all that success, there were still some who didn't like the thing he was doing. It was the traditionalist who recoiled. One conductor spat musical pornography, mocking lights and gowns, sneering that joy had no place in art. To Rie's audiences, however, it meant everything. Dancing families, teary grandparents. Emotion had found its stage. When he said, "With us, you don't feel the solemn hush that drives people away," he meant it. He wasn't selling concerts. He was giving away hope to the people. But behind the gilded lights and sold-out stadiums, the maestro was breaking down. In 2010, at the peak of his career, a new problem arose. André was hit with a viral infection that invaded his inner ear. For a violinist, balances everything. His world tilted. Tours were canceled. Performances called off. The man whose main attraction was saying can do, he was forced to say, "I can't." It was more than illness. It was a fracture, one he hadn't known he'd carried. To be more precise, it was more than sickness. It was the moment a myth cracked, revealed in shuddering imbalance and blurred reflection. In 2010, at 62, André Rieu was felled by a viral infection of the vestibular nerve, an assault on his inner ear that plunged him into relentless chaos. The room revolved in nothing. Not even the ground beneath him offered stability. He lay bedridden with dizzy eyes, scanning walls that spun with merciless motion. The man who had never wavered now felt unanchored. Physicians ordered rest. The tour schedule and the man who was once as rigid as a cement wall collapsed like cheap sheet music. Andreas's recovery was very slow. All types of conventional therapy failed. Then came a letter from an Australian fan. In it, he described his own battle with the same infection and offered vestibular exercises that helped him reclaim his balance. André, desperate, followed the advice. Gradually, the distortion came to an end. After months of withdrawal, he stood again. First, unsteadily, then firm. With time, he returned to the stage, conducting a tour that marked not just a musical comeback, but a recovery of his reputation. Everyone thought he was back to his perfect self, but in reality, no wound, physical or emotional, heals without leaving its trace. The vertigo receded, but his equilibrium remained vulnerable. In 2012, management was quick to deny the return of disequilibrium issues, but accepted the fact that the ear once assaulted remained a weak spot. They also informed that if there was a chance of illness coming back, he would be in grave danger, especially if he was on stage. Then came 2016 in Leeds on a December tour. The trumpet of despair sounded again. There was a companion that André kept very close in his heart. He always tagged along, and his name was Rieu, who was a trombonist and a longtime friend. Everyone was minding their own business, but it was new, struck that he had died in his sleep. It was nothing short of a big earthquake in André's world. Without blinking, he canceled the Nottingham show mid-tour, then halted the rest in London, Birmingham, and Glasgow. This wasn't illness. It was grief, inconsolable, and final. He later admitted he was like a brother, the orchestra, a family in every sense, swayed in mourning. When the music shows returned, it carried the weight of what had vanished from André's life. Even after all of that, he kept strong. And in 2019, when a vicious flu enveloped him in sweats and shuddering fever, he took the stage. The smile stayed, but those who knew him saw how He was fighting with that itself on that stage. Then came the stage that would break him whole. In March 2024 in Mexico City, he had to perform at 6 sold-out concerts. It was a promising victory. After just the second performance, acuity turned to crisis. Altitude jet, lag, and flu converged like storm clouds. There were reports that backstage he faltered, fever, breathless, confusion. He touched his phone and called Marjorie with a hushed voice. "I don't want a first concert day like this ever again." For concerts ended like that. Over 40,000 ticket holders were furious. The orchestra, all 125 people, were sent home mid-tour. Flights reversed, tickets refunded. Emergency. Chaos with no way to uphold their quiet dignity. In that pause, something new happened. Pierre, his son, stepped forward. He wasn't just a son or tour manager anymore. He became a shield. No more intercontinental marathons. The pace slowed. Europe-only performances. Controlled scheduling, sleep, recovery. A soft fortress built around André's health. It wasn't a retreat. It was the correct choice. But if it had been taken a bit earlier, they wouldn't have had to face the consequences of what was about to happen next. In the meantime, everything relied on Pierre, once responsible for logistics, who had now become curator of tempo. He inserted brakes where André would have bulldozed forward. Every flight, every venue now passed through a filter. Can he do this without breaking? He became the waybearer, allowing André to reclaim his music, not at the cost of himself. That collapse, that decision rewrote everything. This was not the fall of a maestro. It was the birth of a new one who understood that every note worth playing must be earned, not through endurance but care. And in that he became more human, more unforgettable. By summer 2024, the transformation was visible, but not all the wounds had healed. André Rieu, now 75, had built his life on the road, and slowing down came with a hidden cost. For decades, the constant movement had been his oxygen. Now with Pierre tightening the reins, each performance carried a different kind of pressure. The pressure to prove he could still do it, not just for the audience, but for himself. He returned to MRI, his hometown stage that July. It was the safest arena in his calendar, the one place where every face in the crowd knew the history behind the man. The concert sold out instantly, as they had for years. But behind the scenes, the preparation was no longer routine. Medical clearances, oxygen availability, backstage, and rest intervals are written into rehearsal blocks. His team, once focused on lighting cues and sound balance, now coordinated with physicians and physical therapists. The audience never saw the checklist taped to the wall of his dressing room. It was a quiet acknowledgement that his body was no longer the silent partner it once was. The list wasn't long, but it was precise. Hydrate before stage limit. Encore length, no post-show handshakes, until heart rate stabilized. These were rules Pierre enforced with the same seriousness his father had once reserved for tempo markings. Yet even with the safeguards, there were moments when the old pace tried to break through. On the third night in Rieu, he extended a waltz beyond its planned length, lost in the swell of strings. The orchestra followed, the crowd stood, and for a few minutes it felt like the past. But when he walked off stage, his shirt clung to him with the same damp heaviness he'd felt in Mexico City. Pierre's expression said what neither wanted to speak aloud. There was still a line, and they had nearly crossed it. The adjustments weren't just physical, they were artistic. André began rearranging certain pieces, lowering the intensity in ways only trained ears would notice. The high-energy polkas became fewer. Ballads, slower waltzes, and orchestral storytelling began to dominate the set lists. Fans embraced the change without realizing it was also a strategy. It was a way to give the illusion of endless stamina while conserving the energy it took to deliver it. Between shows, he spent more time at home than he had in decades. Rieu's stone streets and the garden behind his 15th century home became his rehearsal hall. Instead of Rehearsing for hours with the full orchestra, he practiced privately, keeping his energy bank full for performance days. Friends noticed a softer rhythm to his voice, fewer late night calls, and a newfound willingness to say no. When André Rieu stepped back onto the stage after his long health battle, the applause was different. It wasn't just a celebration, it was relief. For months, no one knew if the King of the Waltz would perform again. His 2009 viral infection had stopped him mid-tour. Doctors had warned him that pushing too soon could end his career. But walking away from music was never an option for André. The first concert back was in Antwerp. Tickets had sold out before his illness. Many expected a reduced show. Instead, Rieu delivered 3 hours of music without cutting a single number. He greeted his audience with that familiar warmth. Yet the sharp observer noticed the changes. He sat between pieces. He paced himself, and for the first time in decades, his son, Pierre, was seen side stage for the entire performance. As you know, Pierre Rieu had been quietly running much of the business during his father's illness. He oversaw the production, managed schedules, and made the final call on whether the tour would even resume. Now he was visibly part of the show's safety net. In later interviews, André admitted Pierre had strict instructions to step in if he showed signs of dizziness. The responsibility was heavy. This was not just about music. This was about his father's health. Midway through the 2010 tour, a special moment unfolded that fans still talk about. In Rieu, André paused during the encore and called Pierre to the front of the stage. The crowd roared as Pierre reluctantly stepped into the spotlight. André handed him a microphone and asked him to sing along with the orchestra. Pierre wasn't a professional singer, but the audience didn't care. It was a rare glimpse into their personal bond, live for thousands to see. The clip spread quickly online, showing a side of André that rarely appeared in interviews. Not the maestro, but the father. Behind the scenes, the pace was still punishing. André's recovery meant careful scheduling, but the reality of touring left little room for rest. In Brazil, the heat was intense. In Australia, jet lag was brutal. André's team adjusted set lists, making sure the most physically demanding numbers were placed early in the show when his energy was highest. Even then, the risk was always present. A recurrence of his condition could end everything again. Pierre's role grew even larger in those years. He wasn't just managing logistics. He became a quiet guardian, making judgment calls that sometimes overruled his father's instincts. André has admitted he sometimes argued with Pierre about slowing down, but he also knew his son's caution was the reason the tour could continue. Fans began to notice subtle changes in André's performance style. There was more audience interaction, more breaks for storytelling between pieces. It wasn't just about conserving energy. André was consciously making his concerts more intimate. He wanted the audience to feel part of the journey, all the highs, the fears, the victories. By 2012, the Rieu machine was back in full force. The tours spanned continents again, yet the shadow of his illness never fully left. André spoke openly in interviews about how it had changed him. He no longer saw himself as invincible. Every performance felt like a gift, not a guarantee. Financially, the comeback was astonishing. The tours grossed millions. DVD sales climbed. The Rieu concerts became annual global cinema events. But behind the success was a constant balancing act, the need to deliver the grand spectacle fans expected while protecting the man at the center of it all. Pierre's influence became even more visible in business decisions. He negotiated with venues to allow longer set-up times so the orchestra could rehearse without rushing. He insisted on medical staff being present at every show, no matter the location. And he began preparing for something André rarely discussed in public: what would happen when he could no longer tour at this scale. In interviews, André brushed off the idea of slowing down, but those close to him saw the signs. The tours were still massive, but the gaps between them grew slightly longer. The calendar allowed for more recovery time. It wasn't a retreat, it was preservation. Still, the demands were relentless. In 2016, the schedule included over 100 performances. That meant constant travel, climate changes, and the mental strain of leading an orchestra across multiple countries. Fans only saw the glitter in the music. They didn't see the exhaustion when the lights went out. Then came the incident in the middle of a European tour. It wasn't dramatic enough to make headlines, but it was serious. During a performance in Vienna, André paused longer than usual between numbers. Pierre moved closer to the stage watching. The music continued, but there was a shift in the air. Later, André revealed he had felt lightheaded. During that set, he finished the show, but the memory stayed with both of them. It was a reminder that no matter how careful they were, the risk was never gone. For Pierre, it reinforced his unspoken mission to protect his father, without letting the audience see the cracks. The following year, André scaled back certain physical aspects of the show. He delegated more to his orchestra members. He encouraged solo performances from them, giving himself small windows of rest without breaking the flow of the concert. Fans loved it. They saw it as generosity. For André, it was also a strategy, but the changes didn't mean retreat. In 2019, the MRIC concerts shattered attendance records. André stood on that stage smiling, bow in hand, surrounded by thousands singing along. It was a moment that could have been the perfect ending to a career. Yet, he wasn't done. When the pandemic hit in 2020, the tour stopped overnight. For André, it was the longest break from performing in his adult life. He spent it rehearsing, recording, and staying in close contact with his musicians. But it also became a time of reflection. The forced pause showed him what life without constant touring might look like. When restrictions lifted, he returned to the stage with renewed energy. The crowds were bigger, louder, and more emotional. People had missed live music. André had missed them more than he admitted. In recent years, the tours have continued, but with adjustments learned from the past. The schedules are smarter. The travel is planned to minimize strain. Pierre remains by his side at almost every performance, still watching, still ready. André Rieu is now 75. He still plays with the same passion that made him a global phenomenon. But those who know his history understand the weight of each note. Every concert is a victory over the illness that once threatened to silence him. Yet there is one thing André has not shared publicly, a decision that could change everything. In a recent private conversation, overheard by someone close to the team, André and Pierre discussed the possibility of one final world tour, the biggest they have ever attempted. No dates have been announced. No details have been released, but if it happens, it will test everything they've built. The music, the stamina, the bond between father and son. And for the first time since his comeback, the question is not if André can do it, it's if he should.